Welcome back. We have Hold Skua out in a yard in southern Spain, preparing her for our upcoming trip across the Atlantic Ocean to the Caribbean. In this episode, we're going to repair our chain plates and replace the standing rigging, the wires which hold the mast up.
Our new external chain plates have arrived. It's something I've been pretty excited about, a really good improvement to the boat which should add a lot of strength. As most of you who've watched us sailing will know, our chain plates ripped out. Basically the previous owner had bedded to them to the hull in not quite a very strong way. So these huge ones are going to be mounted externally, but to save money on the manufacturing, I'm polishing them myself. It's quite a time-consuming process, which costs quite a lot of money if you pay like a welder or machinist or whatever to do it. So the first step I'm doing is turning this finish, which is the mill finish or rolled finish, or however you'd call it. I'm just working on that with the 120 grit flap disc, and it takes quite a long time. I'm not sure if I'll carry on with the 120 grit or if I'll have to go to like a 80 grit to get most of this finish out and then do 120. I'll see how I go with the rest of this one, which is one of the ones I'm working on. So this is a work in progress with the 120 grit, and then this has had also the other flat discs I'm using, so it's kind of nearly a satin finish, but you can see there's still quite some deep scratches in it. And then this one is pretty near finished, I think. There's still some scratches in this as well, so it'd be nice to have a chance to go back over this, but most of it's kind of like near mirror. I should probably clean it up and then you'll be able to see, but there's also still some surface indentations in it which would be nice to get rid of. So after the 120 grit, it's my little box of goodies. I've been using these Polyspeed discs. So this one's a medium, which goes well after the 120 grit flat disc, and this one's a fine one. And then I've got this felt pad, which I've been using with two different like polishing compounds. First the brown, then the blue. So I designed these up myself on a CAD program. Obviously there's no like great design work that goes into them, but each pair, so these are the forward ones for example, has a different bend in the top. So these are bent to 15 degrees, and then these aft ones are bent to 7 degrees, and then the middle ones are not bent, they're just straight, so they go straight up to the shrouds. I also had to specify where each individual hole was, because I wanted to match the existing holes in the temporary chain plate locations, so each one's specific. And then so these are all 10mm mounting holes down at the bottom, and then at the top they're 13mm holes to take a pin of the Staylock rigging that we'll use. So after designing them on the CAD program, I sent them off to a company in the UK to make them, and I think they laser cut them and then bent the tops and then rolled. There's also, so I also didn't say, some of them have got a very slight roll in the bottom, so just to kind of curve it to the hull, and that'll just stop the chain plate from flattening the hull, I hope, at the bottom.
After preparing the chain plates, we started on the long list of tasks which we needed to do to install them and replace the rigging. Firstly, we slackened and removed the existing rigging from the chain plates. We then replaced the chain plate assembly, including the external backing plates, which we'd fitted as the temporary fix to get us out of the Mediterranean. We then dry fitted the chain plates to prepare the hull.
To hold the chain plate off from the capping rail, or at least hold it off a little bit, I've made up these teak wedges. On the bottom that's just some epoxy, and I'll epoxy the top as well, just have to trim it. And so these fit in here, and then the chain plate goes up against that. There's also this little recess of the bulwark to take care of, so that'll be there. And then the chain plate will come down here, and then it will be bedded on sealant.
The teak wedges were held in place so that we could judge the correct curve needed on the bottom of the chain plate. Work?
Yeah. Maybe a tiny bit more.
Was that hard?
Yeah, but I'll do. So when I pulled the old plate off that was on the outside of here, which was the external backing plate from the temporary solution, it pulled off some of the gel coat, so I'm just going to sand that back with the flap disc, and then I'll fill that with epoxy filler. These are the old chain plates, and I'm going to use them as backing plates for our new external chain plates, so I'll have to cut them off around here somewhere. And then because we're using 10mm bolts instead of 8mm, I'm going to have to drill them out a bit, which is a little bit awkward because some of them, like you can see this one, is quite sort of oblonged. Not sure what the right word for that is. It's not particularly round anymore. So I think it's going to be a little bit tricky to drill. Stainless is always pretty tricky to drill. We've got some cobalt drill bits, which I've heard are the best thing, but I've always found them a bit snappy. But I'm going to try and drill this out now, just keeping the drill speed low and trying not to get it too hot, and trying not to snap the corners off the drill bit, which is very easily done. Straighten.
Once the chain plate was dry fitted, we prepared the inside of the hull to take the backing plate.
We let the epoxy filler cure overnight and now it's nice and hard, and I'm just going to take off the tape that I put over it to give it a nice smooth surface, and then I'll see if it needs any sanding or anything.
It was now time to bolt up the assembly and drill out any holes that didn't fit the chain plate holes.
Okay.
At last, we could see how the new chain plates would look on Skua. Next up on the job list was to replace the wire rigging that went from the chain plate to the mast and supported the mast in taking the loading from the sails.
For the 4 bits of rigging that we've now replaced the chain plates for, because there's 2 chain plates each with 2 bits of rigging going to it, I'm going to go up the mast and attach the new rigging at the top. It should be a relatively easy job. The only problem is that sometimes the pins to get the bigger pin out are quite stuck. So, morning. Hopefully they'll come out fairly easily, and then it'll just be a case of swapping these straight over, and then I'll come back down the mast and make up the bottom ends. So this is the bit of rigging that I've just installed at the top end. You'll see that it's way too long, and the end is left bare, so it's just been cut and no fitting installed. So what I'm going to do now is measure and cut it to the right length, and then install a stay-lock fitting. We've always used these on all our boats, and it just means that rather than take all the rigging down, measure it really accurately and get someone to make it up, you can make it up as you go yourself. So it also means that you can repair it if you're nowhere near a rigger or whatever, and it's just good to know that it's been done by you, because then you know you'll take the time to do it properly. So I'm going to thread this into the turnbuckle about 1/3 of the way, and then measure exactly where I want the wire to be cut so that it sits at about this point inside. And then I'll chop the wire and then make up the fitting.
Thanks for watching. As always, if you enjoy our videos, then please consider subscribing to get notification of when our videos are released. A special thank you to everyone who support our videos. Without you, we wouldn't have time to make these episodes, as we'd have to devote more hours to the other ways we make money.